I'm going to talk to you about baseball in the Northwest today. Sort of read you a story that'll be a little bit of fun, a little bit of history, and about looking forward to baseball returning this year in the Northwest. On a bright October morning in the year, a party of ladies and gentlemen set out from Portland on the steamboat Senator, bound for Oregon City, 8 miles up the Willamette River. The men involved were members of the Pioneer Baseball Club of Portland. The planned event was to be the first ever baseball game documented in the Pacific Northwest. The popularity of baseball had grown explosively across the country in the aftermath of the Civil War, with rules being published and informal club challenge games happening and being formalized later into scheduled games as baseball organizations and leagues and rules developed. The Pioneers from Portland appear to have been the very first baseball club organized in the Northwest, closely followed by the Oregon City Clackamas Club. In the early days, the team would often play games against themselves, with one nine playing the next nine, often called the first and second nine. An article in the Oregon Herald, October 5th, mentions the challenge sent by the Clackamas Club to the Pioneers to play a match on the following Saturday against the first nine, or the Clackamas Nine as they were called. The Morning Oregonian reported about the game played on October 13th the following week between the first nine of Clackamas and the Pioneers. The Clackamas players met the Pioneers' party at the Oregon City Wharf and escorted them to breakfast, accompanied by a brass band. They then proceeded to the Kelly Green, where a field had been laid out about a mile north of the city. You can imagine the scene with carriages and wagons, a band playing, ladies in appropriate costume of the period, and baseball players in their uniform. Children and dogs running after them, cheering on the dirt roads out of town up to the grassy pasture that in recent years had been the resting place for the wagon trains that had brought pioneers to the western end of the Oregon Trail. In later years, the Kelly Green would become a regular baseball park with grandstands, and in between this game and that, it was laid out for concerts, for baseball games, for political events, and hosted other large events, including Buffalo Bill's Wild West traveling show. During that period, the pitcher was called the hurler. The behind was the catcher. The shortstop was called the short scout, and right, left, and mid scouts were the outfielders. The player stepping up to the plate was called the striker. The umpire, usually sitting in a chair along the first base line, would cry, "Striker to the line," and the batter would step to the plate. The ball would be pitched underhanded with no called strikes or balls, although one swinging strike would still count as strike one. 3 missed swings would be 1 hand or 1 out. 3 hands would end the inning with the team batting. So any ball that is caught in the air is an automatic out. Any ball caught on one bounce, called a bounder, also would put the striker or the batter out, but the runners could advance at their own peril. So the fans were called cranks, and the cranks might crowd close to the baseline, right up to the baseline in some circumstances. A ball landing inside the lines of play would be a fair ball, even if it rolls foul later. So a ball hit down the first base line, bouncing into the crowd, is a fair ball, and the cranks can kick it around underneath their chairs to avoid the fielders from putting the player out. At that first game in the Northwest, there's not much that was written about the crowd, other than comments of the parades of the townspeople from the field and back again, and the players on the field having a lot of fun. They likely sat on the grass or folding chairs, with more daring cranks sitting just a few feet off of the baseline. The baseballs hit into the crowd could be a hazard, as they are nowadays, but the baseball of the period were not entirely identical to the modern baseball. They were leather covered with a hard India rubber center, tightly wrapped around by yarn, and the cover was stitched on in an orange peel style rather than the S curve of today. So you can see stitched together at the bottom with sort of an orange peel look to it. The ball was close to the modern hard weight size and weight, and it was quite hard until it was beaten up during the game. By the end of a long game, one of these balls would be about as soft as a modern softball, or perhaps even worse. And hitting the cover right off of the ball actually would happen at the end of a game once the ball was really beat up. Also, the foul ball hit into the crowd of cranks lining the field would lead to injury. So within a short period, there were rules about people crowding the baselines. The rule of kicking the ball around by the cranks in the crowd became outlawed, and bleachers were built and distances mandated to protect the fans and protect the players and protect the game, much as we see it today. The famous game in 1866 was won by the Pioneer Baseball Club with a score of 72-24. Something of a puzzle, as the box score recorded doesn't use modern language, so we're not sure exactly what a run meant in the score that was put out there. It's possible, since the game lasted all through the afternoon, but seems unlikely that you could get 72 runs. The Clackamas team and the Pioneers shared a dinner and congratulated each other on a fine beginning, pledging to organize more games to come. Within a short period, a league was formed with teams representing Vancouver, Portland, East Portland, Oregon City, Willamette, and more, called the Oregon, Washington, and Idaho League, although there was never a team from Idaho. It all started on that morning in 1866 on a grassy field outside of Oregon City. 150 years later, in 2016, the Portland Pioneers and the Clackamas Nines met again for an anniversary game here in Oregon City. The crowd was raucous, a band was playing, and the sun was shining. A special baseball bat was crafted with a leather-clad handle and presented to the Clackamas team before the game. In the true style of baseball, the Clackamas team proceeded to beat the daylights out of the ball, and with their new bat, won the game, despite a heroic effort by the Pioneers to repeat the outcome of that initial game. So here we are in springtime again, with the fields awaiting the crack of the bat, the cheers of the crowd, the sun shining down on America's pastime. Strike her to the line, or batter up, as they say now. Play ball.